Hi everyone, it's Miss Titus again. I am back to talk you through how to take this graphic organizer that you have completed for your character in Watson's, how to use that and turn it into a paragraph. So you've put down a lot of information here and you've done a lot of thinking about information that you found. And so now we want to organize it so that it's in a paragraph that makes sense and answers the prompt. So I'll remind you that this prompt was asking us to write about one character from Watson's Go to Birmingham. We needed to choose a personality trait from your character report card that is most true or that best describes your character, see here in that prompt. And then we also wanted to support your thoughts about your character and that personality trait with exact words from the book that kind of prove what you're thinking. So to do that, we first completed this graphic organizer and got down all of our information. Now, when we're writing our paragraph, you'll notice that down the left-hand side of your graphic organizer, there are what we call sentence stems, or ways that you can get your sentences started and then use the information that you wrote in these boxes to complete the paragraph. So to get started, I'm going to go over here on this part of my sheet. Of course, you will be writing this down, but I'm typing it in order to teach it to you. Make sure you indent your paragraph. We always want to indent new paragraphs. And so to start with this intro sentence, I want to make sure that I restate part or as much of the prompt as I can while giving my answer. And usually when we're writing about a specific story or text, we also want to include the title and the author's name so that it's really clear what we're writing about. And we don't want to use little abbreviations like Watson's in our actual paragraph because we want these to be professional. So my first sentence is going to be, in the Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis, and then I want to put a comma at the pause. The character trait that best describes Mama is generous. So what I've done here is I've given the title of the book. Now I also want to make sure that I underline this. So for you, you want to underline it with your pencil because it's the title of something. So I've given the title, I've given the author's name, and then I've also included the information from my box. So I've put in and restated the prompt here, the character trait that best describes Mama is generous. So here we have my character's name, here we have my trait. Now I'm going to move on to my second box where I'm going to use this quote or these words from the text. Now here, depending on what you wrote down, you might have to change your sentence a little bit from mine because we want this sentence to flow while using the exact words from the text. So the way that I'm going to start this is exactly as the box says here. I'm going to say one example of this character trait is when, and I'm going to say she since I just named Mama here, is when she helps Rufus. And I think for me, it might make sense to put a period there and do a new sentence to use my example. So then I'll say, in the book, Kenny says that Mama gave him, and here, instead of this she gave me, I kind of rephrased it in my own words. So now I'm going to say that Mama gave him, and I'll put my quotes because here come the words from the story, that Mama gave him 4 sandwiches and 3 apples for lunch. And this is going to be the end of my sentence, so I'll put the period here since it's the end, and then I'm going to put my quotation marks to show that's the end of all of the words that I'm using from the story. So far, I've done the first box here with In the Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis. The character trait that best describes Mama is generous. So I've restated the prompt and given my answer. For the second one, I've said one example of this character trait is when she helps Rufus. In the book, Kenny says that Mama gave him 4 sandwiches and 3 apples for lunch. So for me, in order to make it flow, I kind of had to split it into 2 sentences. That might work for you, but if you can make it work with just 1 sentence, that's great too. So I kind of split it up here where I said one example of this trait is when, and I explained it. And then my second sentence started with, in the book, Kenny says. So that would be answering this part here. And both of those sentences together is giving that specific example using exact words from the text. So now I want to use this sentence stem and use my connecting thoughts here to start to kind of analyze how this quote shows that Mama is generous. So I'm going to say this example is important because Mama gives extra food. And I'm going to change it a little bit because I don't think saying thing to do is a very professional way. That was just me brainstorming my ideas. So I'm going to kind of polish it up a bit and say this example is important because Mama gives extra food to someone who is not in her family. So now I've kind of taken this idea here, this giving someone extra food, and I've tied it to why the example is important. Now, I've just noticed that I decided to use the phrase not in her own family up here, so I might want to change what I do for my next sentence. So now I want to give a sentence that shows what do we learn about the character. And so I'm going to change this a bit so I don't have repetitive information. And so I'm going to say that her actions, and I can say her because I've just named Mama here. So we know who that pronoun, that her, is referring back to. So I'm going to say her actions show her ability to care for others, which captures a similar idea, right? That she's willing to help. She's caring for people who are not in her own family. So sometimes when you plan out what you're going to write, you'll realize, oh, I have a good idea in one box that might fit better in another. And then you can kind of change it a little bit as you go so it still sounds good. And then my last sentence, this is great. I've pretty much already written it. So I'm going to type, this is the reason that generous is the best character trait for Mama. So you notice I think the only thing I changed was I added the word character between best and trait so that it's a little bit more specific. And now I've taken all of this work that I've done and I've turned it into almost a 6 or 7 sentence paragraph, which is pretty long. And it shows a lot of deep thinking to prove something about Mama. So altogether it says, in The Watsons Go to Birmingham by Christopher Paul Curtis, the character trait that best describes Mama is generous. One example of this character trait is when she helps Rufus. In the book, Kenny says that Mama gave him 4 sandwiches and 3 apples for lunch. This example is important because Mama gives extra food to someone who is not in her family. Her actions show her ability to care for others. This is the reason that generous is the best character trait for Mama. Sorry about the bell. It seems like it's time for lunch. But I hope that this was helpful to you, and feel free to use my example to help you structure your own paragraph.